Okay, first of all, thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule, that too on the weekday, and making it for today's session, which is Cultivating CISSP Mindset. A bit about myself. My name is Prashant Mohan. I am a part of this industry for close to 15 years, and it has been a great, exhilarating experience for uh, that I've seen the evolution of information security, especially in the country like India, where back in those days, 2008, 2009, where security wasn't even a big thing. And I am a security architect by profession. I also like to I also enjoy time talking to a lot of professionals about their uh, careers in security, how exactly they are nourishing themselves. I also get a chance to interact with people who want to engage more towards into changing their career trajectory, career paths, and also I indulge some of the time during the whenever I get some of the times for interaction. I don't want to call it as an education, but yeah, interaction towards some of the security certifications. I have also authored a couple of security books. You might know it as a memory palace from CISS for CISSP and Cirrus, that is for CCSP. Okay. So why are we here today? We are here today for one of the important questions and concerns that we get around about CISSP. What should be an ideal mindset from a CISSP perspective? Now, I know most of you have been preparing for CISSP for quite some time. In case if you have not, some of you might be thinking to get started, right? And maybe some of you would be in the middle of preparation of your CISSP exams, or maybe you're in the verge of completion, whatever the stage you are in. If you have not started, my recommendation would be, well, go ahead and get started. It's definitely one of the most required certification in if you're in this industry, and if you want to have a sort of a sustainable career, right? CISSP is definitely needed irrespective of what sector, what industry you work in. It is definitely one of the most deemed certification that is required, right? So we'll talk about some of the CISSP mindset, the very controversial discussion that we have, technical versus management. Is CISSP a technical certification? Is CISSP a management certification? Do we need to think? There is a very popular book, I'm pretty sure you might have heard about, How to Think Like a Manager, right? So uh, this is something you will be able to figure it out, what exactly or at what level we have to think technically, and what exactly is the management mindset that we have. All of these things we will try and explore with the help of 10 questions. Now, these questions, what you're going to look at, it's not been taken from any of the resources. This is, in fact, let me put it this way. This is, in fact, one of the premier view of one of my personal projects that I'm working on developing a sort of a question bank for security certifications like CISSP, CCSP, or ISSAP, CISM. It's a collective question bank that people can use it. I have tried to take 10 questions out of it, and for I have always been very passionate about some of the childhood characters from the comic characters. I have been very fond of watching science fiction movies, some of the special web shows. So I have tried to take some of the characters from those uh, particular movies or web shows and try to put it into my CISSP questions. The purpose of doing this, that while you prepare for CISSP, it doesn't harm to have a little bit of fun. All right. So we will also keep on talking about some of the tips and tricks that we should get while we are preparing for CISSP exams. How do we attempt the questions? What are the certain keywords? What should be the mindsets? And then we will conclude with any kind of a question and answers that you might have. All right. This particular session, although it has been emphasized more from a CISSP perspective, but in my opinion, this would be very much applicable for other security certifications like CCSP, Certified Cloud Security Professional, and maybe teeny tiny bit for CISM as well. Not completely, because ISSAP tends to test people from a different mindset, but yeah, it could be relevant from that mindset perspective as well. All right, here we go. So how we're going to do that, I'm going to show you a question and we will have 4 choices the way we see in the actual exam, right? We're going to have one question, we will have 4 choices. What I want you to do is, I want you all to read the question carefully, word by word. Some of the few things, few tips and tricks that I would suggest, okay? I want you all to read the question word by word, very carefully, in a way that you are able to understand the core context of the question. While you're reading the question, please make sure that you stick to the context. It's very important, right? Once you're done with the reading, read the options that has been given, option A, B, C, and D, or whatever it is, right? And then emphasize on rereading the question one more time. I want everyone to embrace this habit religiously. No matter if it is a simple question, one-line question, even if you were able to comprehend in the very first attempt, I would still recommend try and reread the question couple of times, at least couple of times. If required, you can go more, but bare minimum, you must read at least twice. All right. While you're reading the question, try to imagine, try to narrow it down with the possible answer, right? For those who have not started CISSP preparation yet, some of the topics you might see would be new. You might or might not be able to answer that, but that's perfectly fine. Here, no one is going to judge anyone, right? But I would still encourage everyone to participate. So when you read the question, while you're reading it in your mind, try to narrow it down with the closest possible thing that comes to your mind first, right? And don't look at the options immediately. Look at the question, read the question. In your mind, try to construct a particular concept that comes, the very first concept that comes to your mind. And when you read the options, whatever the option that you see, which is closest to the construct that you created, here is the very first clue that you were thinking in a right direction. All right. This is, I want all of you to prepare in a way that when you read the question, you probably don't need the options to figure out what would be the right answer. In your mind, I'm not trying to presume anything. I'm not trying to say that you need to have some sort of assumption. But when you read the context, from the given context, try to create a construct of the concept that you were able to narrow it down. Another important thing, do not assume. Assumption is really bad for your CISSP preparation, which means stick to the context. Whatever the given context that we have, we need to stick to that. Do not create a problem that is not given in the question. Please do not bring your own narratives. I always say this to everyone. Please do not create a problem that's not even mentioned there. Only try to stick to the context. Whatever the context that has been given to the question, just be around that and you will never make mistake. Another tip. The reason I'm giving these tips, because we're about to begin the 10th questions sort of a sprint. So I want all of you to do it really well, because these are the questions you have never seen anywhere. Even if you practiced all different given resources, these questions will be very fresh for all of you because you have never seen it, right? Because I've not published the book yet. It has not come out yet, right? So when you read the question, don't only try to find out what is the right answer. That's not the only objective. Of course, we want to find out the right answer or the best answer, as we say in CISSP. The objective is not only to find out that what is the right choice. The idea is also to find out why the other choices are wrong. It is very important that you should be able to convince yourself that the choice that you have made is correct, and also the choices you have left behind, they are incorrect. You should be able to convince yourself. Once you do this, trust me, you will, I won't say that you will never make mistake, but yes, the mistakes will be reduced significantly. That's very, very, very important. So let's see, what do we have in our first question? Read the question carefully, read the options, and reread the question. And bonus point in case if you were able to guess the character and the associated movie or the TV show. So the question is, Sheldon is performing penetration test for one of the clients. While he was undermining the security of the systems, he found a way to gain more privileges and modify audit logs, modify log files. Sorry. What categories of stride threat model is being affected? All right. So the question starts with a scenario that Sheldon is performing a penetration test for one of the clients. While he was undermining the security of the systems, he found a way to gain more privileges and modify log files. What stride category? Now, stride is one of the methodology that we use for threat models. Stride stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and escalation of privilege, right? These are the 6 elements of stride that we have. Now, let's try to find out some of the clues here. Now, see, there are many ways you can solve the questions, right? But the best technique is elimination technique. The best method you can actually achieve more success is elimination technique. Right now, we have 4 choices, so we have 25% of getting our options right. Okay, now what exactly is the very first clue that we have? The very first clue is more privileges. He found a way to gain more privileges. Whatever the privilege Sheldon had, we don't know about it, right? We literally don't know about it, what kind of a privileges Sheldon had earlier, but he found a way to gain more privileges, which means it has something to do with elevation of privilege or escalation of privilege, whatever you want to say. So you can easily eliminate the choices that doesn't have elevation of privileges. You can go ahead and get rid of option A and D. See, from 25%, we immediately move to 50% of our success rate. Now we only have 2 choices. Out of these 2 choices, there will be only one right choice, right? Now the second choice that we have is modify. The second clue, the second word that's going to lead us to the right answer is modify. Modify is associated with tampering, right? So when you modify something, tampering is associated with unauthorized modification. So Sheldon is a penetration tester. Now he is also modifying the modifying the log files, right? Now, when you modify something, which means it has been tampered. Now you have tampering in both the choices, right? So elevation of privilege is also there, tampering is also there. Not enough clue that will lead us to the right choice. Let's see. Then the third clue here is your log files. Now, what is the purpose of log files? Log files are used for establishing accountability, right? Accountability is tracing the actions back to the subject. in a general way, accountability simply means who did what, right? In simple terms, who did what, right? Now, if someone is able to modify the log files, that means we won't be able to establish accountability. And if we won't be able to establish accountability, what will happen? People are gonna deny whatever they have done because we cannot prove someone has done something. And that is going to lead us to repudiation. And that is why our right answer should be here, option C. All right, which I can see majority of you have chosen option C. And that is a wonderful thing. All right, next question. Read the question, read the options, read the question. Okay, what is a mandatory document that supports organization's mission and is not specific? All right. Now, we must be familiar with these terms: standards, policies, procedures, baselines. All of these terms are very important for our CISSP. Now, what exactly is a standard? Standard is a mandatory document that is prepared in order to understand how exactly your policies needs to be implemented, right? So a policy is again a mandatory document that actually determines the scope of the security which is required by the organization. A policy is like a navigation system. A policy is something that is important for every organization that should tell you what needs to be done. That will actually help you in reaching or achieving the organization's goal. However, a policy is sort of ambiguous. A policy is sort of open-ended. What does it mean? You read your organization security policy, you will notice it has statements like every sensitive document need protection. But how exactly it will be done, that's not mentioned. Your data must have a retention policy. But for how long I need to retain? Well, it doesn't talk about that. What exactly it talks about? What part of document that talks about that how long you can retain the document? How long the retention policy should be there? Well, it's the standard. Standard talks about for how long I need to retain. If it is an HR data, maybe it should be stored for 7 years. If it is a financial data, it should be stored for 11 years, right? And so on. These are specifically included in the security standards. Your policy is open-ended. It is not specific. However, that definitely supports the organization missions. Whenever you create a security policy, please make sure that it should be in line with your organization's objective. It should marry your organization's business objective. It should not be deviating from that, right? What exactly are your procedures? Procedures are your step-by-step document, standard operating procedures that you have that actually tells you how to do a specific work. If you want to make changes in the application, well, how do you go ahead and do that? You want to make a change in the firewall rule? How do you do that? So that's your procedures. It is important to maintain the integrity of the business by following the procedures. It is again a mandatory document, but it's not something that qualifies our context. Baselines are the bare minimum security requirements that need to be established in an organization, right? It's a sort of a benchmark that you establish for securing your organization assets. So the only thing that doesn't matches the that is going to meet the criteria, a particular document that supports the organization mission and it is not specific, is your policy. So which is correct? Majority of you have chosen security policy, and that is the right answer, right? You can see the explanation here. Policies are the mandatory document that steer as per the organization missions or goal. Policies are slightly open-ended. For example, policy will tell you to have a retention policy, but they won't tell you for how long we need to retain the data. That duration is given or specifically mentioned in the security standards. All right. Okay. Let's see, what do we have next? All right. Well, this seems to be easy and straightforward question, supposedly, if you read it carefully. So Raj is a security manager and has been given a responsibility for assessing controls for newly built data center. One of the tasks, he is working to implement stringent access control for people who would be accessing the facility. What should be the best security control he can choose out of the following choices? All right. So we have to find out something which is best in nature. All right. Let's have a look at the choices we have. Option A, retina scans. Retina scans are a type of biometric authentication. A biometric authentication is a type 3 authentication, right? Retina scans are the most accurate form of biometric scans that we have. Why? Because it scans behind the blood vessels of the retina. That is the reason it is very accurate. It doesn't gives you the errors that we have, type 1 and type 2, false acceptance rate and false rejection rate. It's not there, right? It's highly accurate. However, it's a biometric. Biometric is slightly expensive. Moreover, considering if you have a retina scan data, the items that you're capturing, you also have to manage or maintain the security of the PHI data. Because when you scan someone's blood vessels, it also reveals health related conditions. Someone has any someone has a hypertension, someone is pregnant, someone has any organ issues, specifically if someone has any kidney disorder, all these things will be revealed with those scans, right? If you wear glasses and if you go to ophthalmologist and take a pressure check, right? So they will tell you these things. So it's an overhead for an organization to maintain the PHI data. So, well, it's a very wonderful choice from a security perspective, but slightly overhead and slightly more expensive. Let's have a look at the other choice. Smart card along with the ID badges. Smart card is a type 2 authentication. Okay, along with ID badges. ID badges is again type 2 authentication. Okay, two different types of type 2 authentication. Can we consider it as a multi-factor authentication or a two-factor authentication? No, right? It's still one factor. It's still we are using a same type 2 authentication, right? We are just using two different types of type 2. So again, an additional control, but with not a very viable feature, right? So I don't think it's a very feasible choice to have option 2 as one of the best security controls. Option A, I can still keep it as a placeholder, but option B, I don't think so. Option C. Option C is smart card, which is type 2, along with the secret pin, which is type 1. These are the two-factor authentication that we are leveraging here. A type 2 authentication and a type 1 authentication. Remember, this is a very important CISSP mindset. If cost is not a very big concern, right? Or in general, forget about the cost thing, okay? For a moment, forget about the cost thing. Whenever you try to choose a security control and you have a keyword such as best, try and find out what option offers you defense in depth, layered security. because you do not want to rely on just one security control. You must have multiple security controls protecting your asset. It's a very core concept of CISSP. And option C seems to be a better choice, right? Up, but let's have a look at the option D as well. Fingerprint and palm scan. Again, this is type 3. And again, this is type 3. Two different type 3 authentication. It's going to be very expensive with, again, fingerprint, not very accurate. Palm scan, even low accuracy than fingerprints that we have, right? So I won't say this is a wonderful choice. So in the given scenario, in my opinion, if you see, option C not only fits the best criteria, but it also offers the defense in depth. So option C would be a better choice. I don't think I would want you to guess the character from this question because it's collectively, I think every other Indian movie actor has the name Raj in their characters, or maybe any other kind of a web show. So probably we can skip on that. Okay. Next question that we have. Okay. Leonard works at the research facility of Caltech University and is responsible for updating patches in the servers used for running simulation of atomic particles. All right. One of the common issues that university is facing about introduction of malware in the IT systems. Okay. Which technique would not help the university to mitigate the problem? Okay. So we have to find out one particular thing that is not going to help the university. All right. So the choice that's not at all useful. All right. Let's find it out. So the first one is standard operating procedure. Standard operating procedure. Remember, we just discussed about in a couple of questions ago, we discussed about the documentation. Procedures, very important. It tells you how to do things. If you have an SOP, if you have the procedural document for updating the patches, for doing your operational task, you will never make mistake if you follow the procedure religiously. It maintains the integrity of the business. So this seems to be a fair choice that is going to help, but we have to find out something that is not going to help. So not a good choice. Separation of duties. What is separation of duty? Separation of duty is it's an administrative preventive control. It's a control that allows any critical task to be completed that involves more than one individual. That involves two or more than two individuals in a particular process. That's what we call it as a separation of duty. Now, how exactly the patches are generally deployed? So once there is if you look into the high-level patch management, we don't want to get into the details, but if you look into the patch management process or policy, we evaluate the patches, we evaluate the patches, we look into the affected systems, and then we test these patches, which means we follow the change management process. And then once the patches have been tested successfully, and before we deploy it, there is a proper checks, right? Every single time from a master server, wherever the patches are being deployed, as it is being moved to another servers, every single time a particular piece of configuration or a code is moved from one system to another, it is always verified for the integrity by either a different process or a different individual, right? Which means there is a process of separation of duty will be immensely useful in this situation. But we have to find out something that is not gonna help. Again, not a feasible choice. Running the patch in an isolated environment before deploying the patch. This is a very common practice that every organization follows to make sure that they don't end up implementing any kind of a malicious code, right? Remember what happened with SolarWinds 2020, right? I'm sure those memories have not been overcome, right? It was one of the most infamous breaches of the decades that happened. That's what it led to, right? A lot of organizations suffered a backdoor uh, getting opened because they ended up deploying the malicious patch. Although supposedly it was a supply chain attack, no one was deliberate at fault. But yeah, of course, we should have tested these patches, verified for the integrity, ran a particular malware scan before we deploy the patch. This is one of the most useful technique we should be implementing. So we have eliminated all the three choices here. That only leaves with one right answer, which is identifying a new vendor for the IT systems. Now, that might sound like a okay choice. I won't say it's a wrong or a right choice, but it's a okay choice, but it's not practically feasible. And moreover, it's not very cost effective. You need to think from a management perspective, from a perspective of where your bosses, like your CISOs, in case if you're a CISO, then very well. You need to think from that perspective, how exactly I need to get a right solution that is not only cost effective, but also think from a long-term perspective, right? Fix the process, not the problem. Problem fixing is not a job of a management. They need to fix the process. So in this case, option D should be your right choice. Okay? Okay. All right. Let's move to the next question. We are almost halfway through. Read the question carefully. Okay. Let's have a look at this. The question is, Amy has been appointed to review the vendor due diligence program for one of the CRM solutions for the company, which has global presence. Okay, few keywords here. There is a vendor due diligence program that we are doing for the organization which has a global presence. Global presence means geographically there will be all the local laws and everything might be applicable there. Okay. Based on the initial review, she identified the vendor does not, there's a typo here, does not have a robust encryption capability for protecting PII data, personally identifiable information, data at rest, which means encryption capability is not there. Encryption is used for protecting the data confidentiality, right? PII data is something which is regulated information, and this organization has a global presence. What should be the first action? First means the very first thing that Amy should be doing. All right. So we have to keep in mind. So in this particular, in such kind of a scenarios, you might have more than one correct answer, but you have to put emphasis on this particular keyword, the first. All right. So Amy should prepare the finding and report it to the management. Well, it's a suitable choice. Preparing the finding and report it to the management, it seems to be a very reasonable thing, right? It's a reasonable thing to do. And what exactly is a reasonable thing that we do? It's your due care. Remember, due care is also called as prudent man rule. It's a reasonable, anything that a reasonable person should do. All right. Now, option two, let's spark this thought. Encryption is not the priority as it doesn't fall under any regulatory requirement. This is a false statement. Pick any regulatory requirement. They won't specifically tell you that you need to encrypt it, but you need to protect it. Data protection is the job of the organization. It's a false statement. You can easily eliminate this. Amy should be accepting the solution as it will fulfill the requirement, but it is not doing it. PII data is the requirement, right? Is the requirement for an organization to be protected. So it's not fulfilling the requirement. You can easily eliminate it. Option D, Amy should look at isolating the solution so it cannot be accessed by anyone else apart from authorized users. Well, this is also one of the tactical solution that can be implemented. When you isolate the solution, there's nowhere in the context that has been mentioned that it has to be accessed by like on public internet and so and so. So this looks like one of the choices that Amy can actually do. What we have to do, we have to think like a manager. And what exactly is the solution that, because Amy might or might not be in a position to issue the ATO. ATO is authorization to operate. Even if she has been appointed to review the vendor, right? She can go ahead and reject the vendor, but before taking that decision, she should always prepare the finding and report it to the management, right? So it is very important that you think from a perspective of a management that has an ability to take the decision, right decision, before taking any action. All right. Okay. Sorry. Let's move to the next question. Okay. Tyrion, who is the security head of Lannister Corp, is concerned about customers complaining of a backdoor opening in their network. Recently, they rolled out a critical patch to the customers, and it appears that a malware was introduced in a patch, which led to open the backdoor. Now, okay, let me complete the question first. What security process should have helped the Lannister Corp to avoid these situations? Avoiding these situations means we are trying to find out a way that we can prevent such thing from happening. Okay. Now, let's have a look at the choices. Patches should have been verified before updating the affected systems. Whatever the affected systems were there, from the customer's perspective, they should have verified the patches, right? Now, how exactly the patch verification would work? If there is some way that Lannister Corp is offering a way to verify the patches, right? Only then it will be verified. Because right here, what we have figured out that Lannister Corporation has rolled out the patches, but someone in between. So this is, let's say, Lannister Corp, right? This is the customer environment. They have released a patch, and there was someone in between. They managed to introduce a malware, right? Now, customers have no clue what exactly they're expecting. They're going to trust this. They updated it, right? Even if they would have verified, right? Verifying, maybe they could have ran the scan for presenting the malware. Well, this seems to be a appropriate way when you actually run a malware scan to find out if the patches would be patches contain a malware or not. But again, it a lot depend on the context where they meets the criteria of this. Do they have these virus signatures or not, and so on. But let's have a look at the other choice. But it looks like a feasible choice to me, to be honest. Remember, we have to find out a way that Lannister Corp should be able to prevent this from happening. Okay, the question is asking from the perspective of Lannister Corp, not from the customer's perspective. Keep that in mind. Okay, Lannister Corp should have a process of digitally signing the patches before rolling out the customer. Now, what exactly is a digital signature? Digital signature is when any kind of data that you want to send from one place to another, you encrypt a particular data using your own private key. So you calculate a particular hash value first, and then you use your own private key to encrypt it, right? And then send this particular thing to customer. Now, customers, what they do is customer is going to decrypt this particular hash value using your public key, the Lannister Corp's public key, and then generate a hash value of their own. And then they can compare both the hash value to verify if something has been tampered or not. So option B, if you include option B, right? Option A will be forcefully done by the customers. If you go ahead and implement option B, which means digital signature, if you implement it, right, you can always go ahead and verify. You will be forced to verify the data, the content, whatever you're receiving, right? So option B actually help you implementing option A as well. So B becomes the superset of A. And moreover, it is being done from the perspective of Lannister Corp here. Customers should have blocked on any automatic patches coming to their network. Well, again, it can be done, it cannot be done, but it is a loss of a customer if they do it, because there are certain critical patches that need to be delivered immediately. I don't think it's a practical solution. Isolate the affected system from the primary network. Well, option D is something what customers can do if once they experience the backdoor, right? Once they experience the backdoor, they can simply try and cut off those systems, affected systems and network from the primary network to make sure that it doesn't get hampered more and more, right? It's a way of handling the incidents, right? Trying to contain the damage. This is the damage containment that we do. It's a part of an incident process request. So what is the best choice here? The best choice, in my opinion, seems to be option B. Because if you perform option B, you will automatically be able to do option A, right? So this is where you can go ahead and make sure that every single time Lannister Corp release a particular patch, when they digitally sign it, customers are anyways going to verify the patches before they update it. All right. Okay. All right. Then we have next question. Okay. What is not one of the reasons an organization would need a data retention policy? So why someone does not need a data retention policy? Or you can think about why data retention policy is not going to be of any help to an organization. First of all, let's understand what is a data retention policy. Data retention policy is, it is going to tell you, you need to keep a data for a certain duration. You cannot keep a data for infinite time, for indefinite time period. You must go ahead and get rid of the data. You must go ahead and purge or delete or sanitize the data whenever the time is right. Okay. So why an organization is not going to have, or what is not one of the reasons an organization should have data retention? First of all, let's understand what is the driving factor for data retention policies. There are two primary reasons. Number one, it actually saves cost. How data retention policy saves cost? Because if you have a data retention policy, you will get rid of the old data. You will have the media free. Your media storage is going to be free. You can add more and more data, right? Because if you don't have a data retention policy, you are piling up all the storage media. You have more data, new data coming up. You're bringing in more storage, and storage is not free, my friend. Storage is expensive, right? If you all are using any kind of a Google Drive or anything, you might be, if you have been using Google for many years, you might be receiving that you are almost done with your storage. If you want more storage, you need to pay extra cost. Storage is never free. So if you have a data retention policy, let's say you have your data retention policy in your personal Gmail that I'm not going to retain an email which is more than 3 years. You are automatically getting rid of those emails. Your storage is getting free. You don't have to pay for extra storage. So it definitely helps in saving the cost. So not a viable choice. Data retention also helps in reducing legal liabilities or culpabilities. It is true. There are so many case studies around it. One of the classic examples I give to people is about Boeing. You might have heard about the Boeing scenario where Boeing didn't have a retention policy, and during one of the customer complaints, they were asked to present some of the data from the past. Because they didn't have a retention policy, they had the data, they had to present it. And when they presented it, it led us to another complaints, and they ended up settling the dispute. I'm not sure about the exact number, but it was more than $90 million. Aftermath told that if they had a retention policy, the entire claim would have settled in less than half of the amount. See, it does reduces the liability and culpability. It protects an organization from any unauthorized data disclosure. If you don't have the data, how exactly are you going to disclose it? You're going to purge it, right? You're going to get rid of the data. So if you have for example, let's say personal records of your old employees who left the organization like 10 years ago, right? But you're still keeping it. What if someone is able to compromise that? But if you don't have it, you lose the risk. You don't have a risk of losing it, right? So option C is also one of the subsequent benefits there. Option D, it provides a better insight on a data ownership. No, sorry. It has literally not enough benefit you can see to have the insight on the data ownership. Although the retention policy is something which is dictated by the data owners, but that has literally nothing to do with why an organization must have a data retention policy. So option D is not one of the viable reasons. It's a sort of a odd one out. All right. Okay. Moving ahead, we have next question. All right. So Prob is a risk manager and have been asked to evaluate the requirements of a new solution being introduced within an organization. One of the key aspects that he recommends conducting a privacy impact assessment. What is the right time to conduct privacy assessment? Now, if you look into the high level SDLC phases, right? There's a requirement gathering that we have, which is also called as initiation. All right. Then we have the design phase. Then we have the development phase. Then we have the testing phase. And then we have the deployment, or maybe like you can say ops and maintenance. Okay. Now, very important exam tip. Anything that you begin with, anything, literally you're kicking off any process, you're kicking off a new project, you're kicking off a new development plan, you're trying to draft a new policy, whatever it is, you want to bring in a new security policy, literally whatever it is, everything must start with risk assessment. This is a thumb rule. Okay, everything must start with risk assessment. So when you kick off a new application development or solution development, during the requirement gathering or initiation phase, you need to conduct the risk assessment. Along with risk assessment, you must also think about performing the data privacy impact assessment or privacy impact assessment. You know why? Because when you start gathering the requirement of the solution, you know what kind of a data it will have, what kind of a data, input data, output data, what kind of a PII, PHI, any sort of data. In case if it has any kind of a PII data in scope, well, you might want to do a privacy impact assessment. Privacy by design. Remember, there's a requirement. Privacy by design must be predictive, must be done proactively rather than doing reactively. And what is a proactive approach? To do it right in the beginning. All right. Design phase. Now, when you design the solution, you're more focused on towards the architecture, the blueprints, the patterns. You generally conduct things like your threat modeling. That's what you do. Testing and evaluation, you look for certification, accreditation. You do for various kind of SAST, DAST, IST, all those kind of things. Development is when the developers write down the code, they perform the peer review, unit testing, all those kind of things. Project planning and initiation is something that you should be where you should be conducting the privacy impact assessment. Okay, a good question. Okay, which compensating control can be recommended for not having data loss prevention solution? What is DLP? DLP primarily prevents any kind of data leakage, which means any person from inside wants to send anything outside the organization, DLP solution should be able to prevent it from going outside. Or if it fails to do that, it will be able to detect it, right? It depends on how do you want to configure it, but it is going to prevent or detect both for any kind of data that is going outside. But if we cannot have a DLP, what else we can implement? Something that can provide a similar level of assurance, but it is not DLP. Let's have a look into the choices. Email encryption with PGP. Well, there are many ways that data can be lost. Email is just one of the ways. But email encryption with PGP, if I go ahead and send out any encrypted email to my personal email, I think I can still be able to do that, right? I'll be able to, until unless we have, let's say, there's a S-MIME protection that forces you to, nowadays you have so many plugins that you run on your email servers that is going to make sure that if someone is being, any email is being sent outside, you can only generate the actual content by generating a certain code or certain OTP sort of a thing. But encrypting email with PGP is might be able to protect the any kind of a man in the middle attack on that email, but certainly might not be able to achieve successfully the data loss prevention method. So not a very viable choice. What about digital right management, DRM? Digital rights management uses cryptographic technique. It is going to allow only the authorized people to have access to the data. Only authorized people can go ahead and do whatever they want to access. A very classic example of DRM. So their DRM is of two types. Commercial DRM that is generally available to your OTT platforms, Netflix, Amazon Prime, or any other kind of you even have it on your, if you're using Apple devices, you have it on your iTunes as well. The reason why you cannot listen to the songs from iTunes, because it has a DRM protection. You need to pay for the money, right? Well, pay for that particular song, $5, $10, whatever it is. The moment you pay for it, your device gets a decryption key because the songs are encrypted. The media is encrypted. You cannot process encrypted data. So same goes with Netflix or something. In case if you want to take a snapshot while you're watching something, and if it has a DRM protection, you know what will happen? The screen will be completely blank. There is a commercial DRM, which is also called as IRM, information management. It runs on your, most of your Outlook has the default capability of your IRM. If you want to send any email that has an IRM protection to someone, that particular fellow recipient only have two choices. That person can either read the mail or delete the mail. They cannot forward that mail. They cannot save that email. They cannot take a printout. They cannot even share their screen and show it to someone else. It's not possible. What exactly it looks like? To me, it looks like it's a capability that can provide an assurance as DLP. Let's park this thought. Training and awareness program. Again, I know some of the folks have chosen a very well thought choice that you've made, but it cannot be made as effective as DRM. If you tell people that you're not supposed to do things, it's very effective way of controlling the data loss. If you have a program, if you tell people that these are the do's and don'ts, it is successful to some extent, but not for the determined insider threat. An insider threat is still one of the largest threats that the organizations are dealing with. So very close, but not very effective. Okay. Option D, classifying the data with the highest classification. Well, I don't think it's going to help in any way. So option B is something which is the most suitable and the closest compensating control that you can have in the absence of your data loss prevention. Okay. Wonderful. Let's have a look at the final question. It's a small one, should not take a lot of time, but make sure that you read it carefully. By the time we reached 10th question, most of we forgot the rule that we had. You need to read the question. You need to read the options. You need to reread the question. All right. Anyways, let's have a look. What is the primary purpose of the certificates in PKI? Now, what is PKI? PKI is here public key infrastructure, right? It's a technique, it's an establishment that we do to make sure that any two parties who didn't know each other, now they want to talk, how they have never trusted each other, they have never seen each other or talked to each other. Well, PKI can actually help them in talking to each other. Let's say Alice and Bob, they don't know each other. Well, with the help of PKI, they can go ahead and start communicating. It's a way of establishing the trust. The question, if the question would have asked, what exactly is the primary purpose? See, if you look at the options, identification, authentication, encryption, establishing trust, they all are the objectives of PKI. All of them are the objectives of PKI. Primary purpose of PKI, I agree. It's establishing trust. But the question didn't ask the primary purpose of PKI. It asked you, what is the primary purpose of certificates in PKI? That's the reason I suggested. Read the question carefully. What is the primary purpose of certificates? What's the purpose of certificates? Forget about primary, secondary. What's the purpose of certificates? Certificates are used to verify someone's identity. If I connect on LinkedIn, LinkedIn hands over their certificates to my browser. What my browser is doing browser is verifying if I'm the right, if I'm connecting to the right LinkedIn or not. What exactly it is doing it is verifying the identity of LinkedIn. And what is the term for verifying someone's identity? It is called as authentication. Authentication is something that we do with the help of certificates. All right. So this is the reason why I always suggest take your own sweet time, not too much time, but take your own sweet time to read the question carefully and answer the questions properly. And this is how we completed our session. All right.